Hey, how you doing? This is LibertyReAwaken with episode 3. It's the ultimate American argument for socialism and what I think of it as a libertarian. So Americans know that we're the most wealthy country in the nation, and but we still have poverty, or cultures that aren't doing as well. There's some citizens that could be doing better, and so they say that if Americans can afford it, that we should be helpful, so that we've got these billion-dollar budgets, and that we get $1 trillion, and so if we can afford to help people, that we should, and that there should be no person left behind. And so that explains a lot of the welfare programs, Social Security, healthcare, and things like that. And so, what I'm here to talk about is why that's foolish thinking. So you have to have people rely on themselves, because when they start to rely on the government for everything, then it takes that fight out of them. But they know that there's always going to be somebody there to look after them, and that the government is always there, that it's going to end up with people not working as hard as they can, and then ultimately the society isn't as prosperous as they could be. An example of that is the people in Greece, where from cradle to grave, that these people are used to getting money from the government for everything, and then when the country went bankrupt, and they were like, well, we need to take back some cuts, otherwise our economy cannot continue to go on. We need to make some cuts. But anywhere that they made cuts is affecting somebody, and the citizens were saying, well, you can't make those cuts for that particular thing, because then that's going to affect me. I can't afford this, or my housing, or my food, or whatever, because all the citizens have become so reliant on that for their income and for housing and childcare and elderly and everything, that when they suggested any cuts, that people literally started rioting in Greece, because there was no self-reliance. It was only on the government. And those things are very costly. It's too expensive for the government to take care of everybody. And so then when Greece started to have financial problems and they couldn't afford it anymore, and they tried to make cuts, that people rioted, and the country's still in ruins, because there's not that sense of individual responsibility and pride for earning and providing for yourself, because when the government does it, it's too expensive. The government just can't afford it. And so when you're giving up your money, you think you're doing, when you vote for some progressive politician who's going to redistribute the funds, that causes problems, because you can't control where that money's going. You can say that they're voting for this or that, but there's such huge black budget in that the government does, and things, undoubtedly things that you disagree with, that the government does and you're paying your taxes for. So way more efficient is for each citizen to be taxed less, and then they can voluntarily give up that money to the contributions they think is worthwhile, and then takes the government out of it. You can give directly to the charitable foundations that you want, and then take out the middleman, so then you don't have to hire somebody to give money to somebody else. And the U.S. is the most charitable country in the world. I looked up a statistic where we are 3 to 14 times more charitable than our European counterparts. It's like the French is the worst, where we donate 14 times as much money as they do. And it's because when people are prosperous and you have the money, you have the ability to do it, that they do. And 91% of the richest people give millions, billions of dollars to charity. And so that's just what happens when you have the individual responsibility, the pride, and then you give back to society, and you can take back that responsibility from the government, because the government's going to do a bad job. They take the money and they force it into things that you don't agree with, and so then it gives you back the power of your own money and your own hard work, for you to have no taxes, to have less taxes, and then be able to give that money to what you think works well, and then the whole system is just much more efficient. And so limited government is the best to facilitate capitalism, and capitalism has been wiping out poverty throughout the world. In the past 20 years, there's been, more people are being fed and taken care of than ever before, and it's because the example that the U.S. is setting. There's a common thing in the American culture that black people should get reparations for slavery in America, but when America stopped slavery, that the rest of the world followed, and we've been leading the world in cultural changes like that ever since and then World War II, and we became a powerhouse in the way we do trade and banking, and we set the example for what it means to be hardworking and the American cowboy. So we have to continue to set that example. And so even if we can afford to get people out of poverty, the best thing to do is not hire a government politician to do that, but create a situation in a capitalist society where the most money is being generated and then it's given out, and then you take out the government, who is no good at being efficient at things, and give it right to the programs. And so that's what happens. But when you hire the government to be the middleman for that, and then it becomes wildly inefficient, money gets stolen. They're giving to things that you do not agree with, and that shouldn't be having given money to them. But then you take that money and that power back and give it to the individuals. So that's why that saying that just because America can afford to give to poor people doesn't mean that they should. That'll be an individual responsibility to do, and that is human behavior. That people are, for the most part, inherently good, and they will do that. Bill Gates is having all of his other billionaire buddies donate their life's work to charity, and that's just how people respond when they can afford to give up money to help other people. That they do, and then it's more prosperous. Then more business will be built, more money will be created, and because that's how money works, by borrowing and giving. So the economy will do much better, and then you can give more for the most people. And then technology advances, and everything works out better. To do the most for the poor people and the disadvantaged is capitalism and limited government. When the government starts to get involved, and then they just destroy everything. So just because America can afford to give people out of poverty doesn't mean they should, because that instills the wrong values in society and is, in fact, not the best way of doing that. So that's what I think about whether or not the American economy can afford to give money to the poor and disadvantaged.